Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banko and me, Adam Moreau. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the T-Work podcast. Joining Banko and I today is Wes Azzaidani, founder and director of Tales of Khayr. So we came across Wes actually via email, and I'm stoked that he got in touch with us. I really think he has a unique story to tell here. This is really going to be something I haven't taken a dive into. I'm not much in the media world in this regard or consuming comic books, but Wes has a very creative idea, and I can't wait to hear him tell his story. There's so much more to him than just the brief, probably crappy intro that I provided. So I'm going to kick it over to Wes right away in classic fashion, and hopefully he can pick up the pieces for me. So, Wes, thanks a ton.
No, thanks for having me, Adam and Grant. Thanks. It's great being with you guys here. So yeah, like you said, I'm Wes Azzaidani, creator of the director, founder of Tales of Khayr, which is a publishing house, and uh, the creator of the Brotherhood of the Wolf dark fantasy series. And I think uh, one of the things that we're doing here is solving some specific problems that maybe we might be able to talk about a little later in the conversation. And I'll just put it this way. I think in the same way that, for example, you, Adam, are like when we're an athlete and now you're moving into like the entrepreneurial sphere. I've had my own journey, kind of from tech to storytelling. And so after a little bit of success in tech, the tech industry, I decided to pursue a passion project that was on my mind for a while. And so the inspiration began when I was like a wee lad in high school, or like late high school, early college. And I discovered an article written by this Afghan guy in Texas called Shibli Zaman. And the article was How the Muslims Killed Dracula. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of things because it showed us that, well, the real history of Vlad the Impaler, i.e. Dracula, um, and his brother Radu. He had a younger brother, a younger half brother called Radu the Handsome. And we never really heard of all the Dracula content that we get in Hollywood and whatever. I've never heard of the story before, nor did I was I knowledgeable about how Radu actually fought Dracula. Like Radu was loyal to the Ottoman Empire and kind of fought his brother for a long period of time. And so this led me to the question, it's like, wait a minute, why haven't we heard the story before? And why is it that Muslims are so often portrayed as villains in Western media? Why is this history that I'm talking about here not, we don't see it in Hollywood? And that kind of got me down a rabbit hole where this he's dead now, but he was a professor of communications at a university in Indiana, Professor Jack Shaheen, and he wrote a book which was later turned into a documentary called "Real Bad Arabs: How Hollywood Vilifies the People," and "real" spelled REEL. And he just went through the data and just said like of the movies that were released between the late 1800s, which were like your originally black and white silent movies, to like the year 2000. There's like 1,000 movies that had uh, either Muslims as a religious group or Arabs as an ethnic group featured in it. And of those 1,000 movies, only 12 showed them to be somewhat decent human beings, which was like shocking. And it jived because that was what I would grow up with. Like I'm growing up as a millennial. I don't know if you guys saw the movie True Lies. I was like, dude, what the F? What the F was that? So but then just seeing all this data, I'm like, yeah, that matches. So I'm like, well, hopefully somebody will do something about it. And then I just left it at that. It's like, going on my merry way, working in healthcare and tech and whatever. But then after a certain point, I just saw that the stuff that Hollywood was putting out was really starting to become cringe. Um, South Park kind of makes fun of it a little bit when they were making fun of Kathleen Kennedy. I don't know if you saw if you guys are South Park fans. Are you guys, wait a minute, hold on. Are you guys South Park fans? Let me establish that. Let's see. This interview might be over depending on how you answer. Let's see. Are you guys South Park fans?
Well, I know of maybe two true South Park fans, and I'll explain why I say two true.
Yeah.
Um, my cousin Eli has a written out ranking of every single South Park episode rated from both what he thinks is cinematically the best to worst, as well as his personal enjoyment best to worst. So I view that as like South Park fandom. I watch it when it's on and I find it funny.
Okay. Eli will be the savior of Western civilization. You'll see this. But anyway, so regarding wait a minute, Grant, you've been silent. What's your
Yeah,
South
no,
Park?
my short answer would be I am not a fan.
All right, Grant.
Are you
Yeah.
Yeah.
anti? I don't even know if you're.
I'm not anti, I never got pulled in growing up to it. Like I would see it and it just never pulled me in and grabbed my attention.
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to watch it for a lot of years.
I
Oh,
also had that when I was younger. Yes, I did have that, but as I got older, just didn't appeal.
my parents are like fobs, like off the boat type immigrants, and so when they saw me watching South Park, just like passing by the living room as I'm watching the TV, they're like, "Oh, it's like, hey, what's this?" And I'm like, "It's a cartoon." And they're like, okay. But anyway, so well, one of the South Park recently really I don't know recently, but they released an episode that's kind of captures the problem that I'm talking about, which is like Kathleen Kennedy, who's in Disney, executive in Disney, and she runs Lucasfilm, which produces Star Wars and stuff like that. And it's just like a joke where it's just like, oh, we need to make this film. What are some ideas? And she's like, put a chick in it and make it gay. And and I'm like, okay, that's kind of an exaggeration of the problem that we're seeing, but there is an element of truth to that, which is why it resonated so much. Because people when they look at entertainment and stories, they expect to be entertained, right? And they expect for heroes to have some sort of flaw that they need to overcome as they solve kind of an external goal. Like thinks the original Star Wars, where Luke starts off as this know-nothing kid who's naive and occasionally impulsive, and he has to grow to become more mature, and so he has an internal growth, but he also, in order to meet the external needs, defeating Darth Vader and blowing up the Death Star and defeating Palpatine and all that stuff. Whereas these days, it's like they don't really do that as well anymore in Hollywood, where it's like if they really want the protagonist to be female, but they don't want the female to have any flaws, so they make the female character into something called like a Mary Sue. It's kind of called where like she can do no wrong, she has no flaws, and if she has any flaw, it's that she doesn't realize how incredible she is. That's kind of the situation, and I think that's kind of the approach that they took with Captain America, not Captain America, I'm sorry, Captain Marvel, which is why it's just like that character that is just so unappealing, right? Because this is like, well, if you don't have a character with internal weaknesses that they have to deal with, then it's hard to yeah, relate to them. It's hard to root for them, and so that's a big problem. In addition to the anti-Muslim stuff that I mentioned earlier. So all those combination of things together, I'm like, okay, I was initially waiting for somebody to solve this problem. It looks like I'll have to be one of the people who steps up and does something about it. I could either do that or just be one of those keyboard warriors who's like, I can't believe this. They did this again. This sucks. Just just like I could be the Redditor with like three three chins. Just like, oh, this sucks. I
Other
can't
part of
believe.
South Park, you could
Yeah,
be World
exactly.
of Warcraft guy.
Yeah, I could be World of Warcraft guy, or I could actually, get off my ass and do something about it. And so I'm like, okay, let me do that. So, I mean, here we are. So that resulted in this dark fantasy series called The Brotherhood of the Wolf, set in the 15th century Ottoman Empire, that you can kind of think of like The Witcher in the Ottoman Empire setting, which I don't think anybody has really done ever uh, anywhere. So we are not kind of, we are going to new territory. Yeah.
So taking a step back, initially that kind of the idea sparked back in high school for you.
Yeah.
but then you went more the traditional route of going into corporate America. It sounds like tech, healthcare,
Yeah.
etc. How big was that window from the first spark to, all right, I need to actually do something about this?
Several years, like I'd say yeah, like probably 2 decades worth of a gap between me getting that initial spark of saying, "Hey, someone needs to do something about this," and then realizing, "Oh, I I need to be that guy." Right? I just can't wait for the cavalry to arrive. Like, it's like in those things, it's like, oh, the cavalry's arriving, but then you realize there is no cavalry and you have to be the cavalry. That's the kind of thing that hit me. Um, yeah, it's like initially like exciting and scary at the same time.
And do you think it was a sorry, Adam.
No,
Uh,
you're good.
okay. Do you think it was a buildup of things over that 2 decade period, or was there some big thing that happened that you were like, all right, I'm done. I'm the person that needs to start taking action and doing something about this.
Yeah, I think I used to be in marketing as a direct response copywriter, and I worked for a startup that was starting to grow, and you know, I was trained in a way where from previously, where it's like, okay, you create the marketing that appeals to people so that they can click the link to buy, and so that's what I was doing, but I was given direction. It's like saying, oh no, just make it sound more corporate. I'm like, who opens a corporate email? Who clicks on the links in corporate emails? Like you get a corporate sounding email from Costco. Are you gonna click it? Um, like what's more likely that you're gonna click a corporate signing email from Costco that sounds like it was generated by AI, even though at that time AI wasn't really a thing, or would it sound better if like, or would you more likely click if it's like, hey, I'm Billy Bob whatever. I'm the CEO of Costco, and let me tell you a story about, when a wood chipper ran over my foot and I had to divorce my wife. Just whatever. So it's like, and so even though I was getting the results that we were hoping to get from a numbers point of view, it wasn't really a personality fit. So I just waited until I got fired so I can get the severance. And so I'm like, okay, what do I do next? And so I'm like, you know what? Let me just do my own thing and solve this problem that I've been just sitting on for years and years and years regarding the entertainment world.
So for lack of, well, actually, I'm going to interrupt myself and to say, Banko, you just asked the same question I was going to ask in a more sophisticated fashion. So good job.
Good
Sweet.
job,
Uh,
Banko.
yep, that's right. We praise him whenever we can.
Yeah.
Now, before I rudely interrupted myself, where I was going to go is it sounds like to a certain extent your creative inner fire was rearing its ugly head in a sense throughout your kind of corporate day job, and it was
Yeah.
just waiting for the opportunity to really come out. So was there ever an outlet that you had prior to going all in? Like were you writing, I don't know, fan fiction, or like you brought up Reddit, were you posting or doing anything to release this creative energy that you had besides just letting it occasionally come out in the workplace?
No, not really. I was suppressed. Creatively, Adam, I was in the closet. And all these situations that I mentioned dragged me out of the closet. And initially it was scary, but people accepted me, and now I'm as flamboyant as ever with my creativity. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say.
Well, it paints the picture, so
It
I'll take
does,
that.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
you're a
so
storyteller.
yeah,
Yeah.
great storytelling. Now, was there ever a point where you got to experiment early on? Now this is funny. I like where this is going.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
did you get to experiment creatively at all early on, or was it just like one day you knew this is a path you needed to go? Like whether it was in high school or throughout your education, did you have a chance to write for a newspaper or something like that?
Yeah, well, in 1997, like, summer camp, and he said that he has candy. He did not have candy, that mother. Oh, no, we're talking about, okay, no, I see what you're saying. So, well, actually, there was one situation, like, where yeah, like, I was in a college prep school in middle school, junior high, here in the Seattle area, which was somewhat elite, even though it was technically public school. It was one of those things. And we we were given a curriculum that was very rigorous. Reading a lot of classics. So not just like your typical The Giver or whatever they give to kids in public school, but like the classes like the Iliad, the Odyssey, Shakespeare, and really deep diving into the stuff, right? To a point where it's like we deep dive into every little line and imagery. Where a lot of time, just so I can catch up, I would read the Cliff's Notes version of the story ahead of time, just so I know what the story is, so I could spend my time just like looking at every sentence and like analyzing. That was kind of the way it was set up. So like our mind was like not filled not with pop culture stuff, but also just classics, which I think was very helpful. And so there is something to be said about being given a s- not to sound elitist, because it's not as it's not like going to prep school in the UK or whatever. But there's something to be said about being given a rigorous education that's based in the classics. So I think that's the start of it. And then I did have a chat. I was pushed into being in drama club. I was literally pushed into it by one of the teachers. And, like, I really didn't want to do it because like I didn't like drama kids because they were weird and I was cool. That's what I would tell myself. And I was like, no, 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 do it. It'll be great. And I'm like, okay. So I just, directed a play, which was essentially long story short, it was the guy, his had a baby, and the baby was eaten by Hannibal Lecter. That was literally the play that I directed. And that play was shut down because this was eighth grade, eighth grade or ninth grade. Yeah, ninth grade, either ninth grade or 10th grade. But just like something where it's like all the parents were watching this play and they're like, what the F is this? What? And I'm like, hey, you wanted this. So anyway, so yeah, I was able to like explore a lot of the creative exercise a lot of the creative juices in in that time, but also like, yeah, writing stories, stuff like that. But really after that period of time, I didn't really have a chance to do that anymore, and nor did I actively pursue it. So I was at that point just a consumer. But those seeds were planted back then, and they came out. Yeah.
So what you're
I'm trying to find a way to continue to play with the gay thing. Gay metaphor. I'll find a way. Give me time.
I was just gonna say, so you're telling me I probably should have actually read the books in school and not just read the Cliff Notes, and that's it, to be more creative?
Listen, Grant, listen, you strike me as a kind of a Chad. You don't have time. You don't have time to be reading books. You don't have time to be reading books. There's games to play, baby. There's girls to deal with. They need your attention. Okay? Where's the Cliff's Notes version for dealing with the ladies in school? So no,
I'm
Grant,
still
you
trying to find that.
what? Okay, well, I mean, uh, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, so but no, seriously, like people really underestimate the power of reading the classics, of just like for example, one of the things that we had was like a debate class, a philosophy class, and a lot of it was just like dumb, but it kind of did sharpen it does sharpen your thinking to figure out like, okay, when this person is making this claim, like it does sharpen your intuition somewhat about like, okay, what's true, what's bullshit, that sort of thing, especially at that young of an age. So yeah, there is something to it. But listen, if you're picking up chicks like Grant, or trying to pick up chicks like Grant, then it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter.
Counterpoint, Wes, if
Yeah,
he spent more time studying the classics, he would either be chasing down 12-year-olds, Romeo, Juliet, or starting international warfare over a single woman.
that is
So
true. That is true. But you know,
So
like they say,
Banko,
like,
thank you for not paying attention in 8th through 10th grade.
you know, like,
I paid
maybe
attention. I just didn't read.
if Banco did read, like he'd be like that. Who's that guy? What's his name? Luigi, the guy who killed the healthcare CEO.
No, do not associate me with
Yeah,
him.
I think his
but
social
no,
skills are a little elevated from
no,
that,
no,
but
no,
I'll
no,
say
no. But
like,
here's the thing: that guy, he did that. And hey, by the way, just this is for any fans of the T Work podcast. We are not advocating for the assassination of any CEOs, healthcare or otherwise. But that
thank you.
guy,
We're an anti-murder podcast.
we are an anti-murder podcast. But one of the things that uh that came out of that tragedy was like as the Luigi criminal guy like there he's like in court, like there's who's waiting in court in line, this huge line of women. I'm like, what is it about women and their fascination with like murderers? And I don't know, I think it could be like a evolutionary psychology thing where they're attracted to the conqueror, Khan type thing. I don't know. All I'm saying, Grant, is like, yeah, maybe it was a good thing that you didn't read those books. Let's just maybe.
So, question off of that, Wes, you bring up the evolutionary psychology piece. Now, with your writing, we're going to tie it back. We're all about crappy segues around here and getting it
Love it.
back to you eventually.
Nice.
And that's my attempt with
I,
this
I want
one.
to talk more about Grant because I feel like he's just more interesting. But okay, let's
This is
talk about
definitely your podcast. This is definitely your podcast. We're here to learn about you.
Number one way to make him feel uncomfortable, make him talk about himself. But
Yeah, don't do that.
exactly. So, Wes, involving this evolutionary psychology topic back to your writing and maybe some of the themes that you address, whether it is this topic that we just discussed, are there certain topics that you like to tie into your writing or that you think are valuable? You talked about kind of a new look at the Muslim or Arab people that hasn't been portrayed. So, are there other things in the evolutionary psychology of us as a human race that you are either bucking the system with or that you think are worth continuing or celebrating in a certain sense?
okay, so two things I'll say there. So first of all, yeah, I think when it talks about like I think one of the things that people have this idea is like, okay, they see there's problems in how Muslims are being portrayed in media. And so their thing is like, okay, we'll get a brown person, we'll give them a vaguely Arabic name, and we'll just have them be super woke. And that seems to be the trend. Like there's a cartoon character where it's like she's like hijabi, so she wears a headscarf, but she's like lesbian, and she had a, a non-Muslim boyfriend, and she broke up with that non-Muslim boyfriend to have a lesbian relationship with another woman. And I'm like, what is this? And their response would be, well, it's representation. I'm like, but in what way? What is it representing? So for us, it's like when we talk about, I don't like to use the word representation because it has a bunch of connotations. I think I think the term is a better, like realistic depiction. So realistic depiction, like good and bad, right? The bitter and the sweet. But more importantly than that, it's exploring themes. For example, the lesser evil, the chapter 0 of the Brotherhood of the Wolf. Not a single Muslim appears in that book, not a single one. But the story is exploring a theme about choosing the lesser of two evils, which is something that's discussed in Islamic law, right? And that legal theory, that legal principle is taken from the Quran, which talks about like, there's a certain, I think in the 54th chapter, it talks about fear God all you can. And so from there, Islamic legal scholars, they took this idea of like, okay, you're obligated to choose the lesser of the two evils. And then I'm like, okay, but let's take that theme of choosing lesser of the two evils and explore it in the context of uh, this kid, Nikephoros, who is in Constantinople in the 15th century, and weird things are happening, and his mom has to make certain decisions, and there's stuff that she's kind of hiding, etc. And so, like I said, that entire book we're exploring that theme in an organic way that's very exciting and that reviewers really liked. But not a single Muslim character shows up in that particular book, but we're still exploring themes that are relevant to the tradition, but in a non-preachy way. Because if I didn't tell you all this context, you wouldn't know. You should be like, "Wow, this is a really cool story," you know. So, so that's one thing. It's like just really, it's less about metaphors, less about just like demographic representation. Oh, we have brown people, and oh, look at this guy, he's wearing a turban. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the deeper stuff. And the second thing is when we're talking about psychology, it's not so much evolutionary psychology, it's Jungian psychology. Like Carl Jung was the student of Freud. Freud is the psychologist who everybody says, oh, he says people want to have sex with their moms. And I'm like, not me, not me, Freud. I'm not into that. So like F Freud. But anyway, so yeah. But he had a student called Carl Jung who was very much into things about the collective unconscious and archetypes. And it was based off of Jung's work that George Lucas created the Star Wars mythos because Jung also had I think, a student, Joseph Campbell, who created a book called The Hero of, I think, 1,000 Faces. And George Lucas was like, yes, this is what I'm going to base the original Star Wars on. So all this to say, um, because I mentioned like masculinity in Hollywood is kind of like not portrayed in a way that's very appealing. I'm like, okay, have our four characters. Let's have four characters, and each of them represents a Jungian archetype of masculinity. And there are four Jungian archetypes. There's the king, lover, magician, and warrior, right? So Nikephoros, who becomes Koja, it represents the warrior archetype, and we have other characters who represent different archetypes, and they're not like goody two shoes. Like they have their addictions and their internal problems, which affects how they engage with each other and the plot. And so essentially, these guys, while they have these personalities and some of these internal challenges, they have to form a monster hunting guild that hunts monsters in like the Ottoman Empire and the Balkans. And so that's kind of the premise of the Brotherhood of the Wolf.
No.
So go ahead.
Can I continue here? It
Yes,
is a topic.
yeah.
It's a mild topic change.
So is mine. So you're good.
Okay, cool. This is how we do this thing, Wes. It's the nature of being roommates for a while.
Well, actually, mine is kind of related now that I think
All right, you go
about it.
first.
All right. I mean, you connect things back to Hollywood and how they've evolved storytelling, films, etc. What do you think that's driven by? Do you think that's driven by the audience and what they're wanting, or is it more the Hollywood is trying to deliver a certain message and then they're teaching the audience to want more of that?
Yeah, that's what they're doing, the latter. Yeah, it's not because the audience wants it. I mean, they're like a very small minority. It's the latter. But then you might ask the question, well, what's motivating Hollywood to like inject this message in everything, right? Like to the South Park thing, like why is everything like, put a chick in it, make it gay? Like, why is it doing that? Like going out of its way to do that with every single property that seems to be coming out? And one of the big things is financial, because sometimes these studios don't make good financial decisions, and they're financially in trouble, and so they um, accept investment and funding from investment capital firms like BlackRock and other firms like that, which do have mandates saying like, hey, listen, now that we're invested in your studio, we have expectations that you will do diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And DEI in and of itself isn't a bad thing, right? If you really like, just it's about the execution of it, and how it's executed is more often than not, in my experience, not helpful. And so it'd be like, oh, you need to replace all these male characters with female ones. You're going to have to show white men as weak and incompetent and or dumb and toxic. You're going to have like a lot of like LGBTQ, XYZ, whatever stuff in there that might not fit the story. And so then the studios are like, well, okay, well, we need we need to satisfy these investors, and so they'll take their properties that they already exist and just inject these things in, and the audience notices, and they might go and visit, they might go and buy a ticket once or twice or whatever, but at a certain point, you just like people stop showing up, like you've kind of exhausted your trust with the audience, and instead of recalibrating their strategy and saying, hey, we're alienating our established audience. Let's see what we can do to get back on track. A lot of the creators of these properties, they're like, oh, well, the audience sucks. Like the audience is toxic, the audience is dumb, etc. If you don't like it, don't watch it. And it's like, well, pissing off the people who would be paying you, who you rely on to be successful isn't the best thing to do. But for them, it's just like, well, the investment firms have this expectation, and they're the ones who are, you know, have bigger leverage. So that's the why behind it. It's not some organic thing that people are coming and saying, oh yeah, we want a bisexual Superman, which is what they did recently. So yeah. It's tragic. But like I said, we could either like complain about it and just be like, oh, these guys suck, or we could create an alternative, and if it resonates with people, it resonates with people. But with that said, one thing I would say is like a lot of people in the indie scene, they make the whole culture war thing the only thing that they're about. It's like, is your book any good? No, but it's not woke. I'm like, okay. Is your book coming out on time? No, but it's not woke. I'm like, okay, well, so all you have is your culture warrior stuff, right? You're just on the other end. You're not woke, you're anti-woke, but is your stuff good? And a lot of times the answer is like meh. So for me, I'm not really interested too much into going on social media and getting sucked into culture warrior things. It's just like, listen, we got great characters, we got a great story. If it resonates with you, great. If not, we're not gonna be like, oh, you suck. We're just be like, all right, c'est la vie, you know? Um, because that's the thing. It's like the story is either good or not good. You don't have to constantly be leveraging culture war talking points to like lift it up, because people will see like if a story is not compelling, they'll find out really quickly. There's no amount of like marketing lingo that you can throw at it to put a lipstick on a pig. So there we go.
Where I was going to go prior to that, and Banko, great question, by the way. I thought that was very interesting what we got out of Wes there. Now, I am a complete ignoramus when it comes to different forms of kind of consumed media. I don't pay attention to a lot of movies that are coming out, new TV shows. I kind of stay in my lane to a certain extent. But from what I have heard from different podcasts or different, I guess, audio content in a certain extent that I've consumed, is kind of the draw to anime in a sense, in the characters that are represented in anime. And oftentimes, what I have heard, granted, I don't have much experience with it myself, is part of the draw in why often adults are still drawn to what can be seen as animations for kids or things like that is the problems that characters face or the flaws or shortcomings that they have are very real and very relatable, even if it is a fictitious space environment or something like that. But they are realistic problems, and the characters are still presented as human. They have pros, they have cons. Not everybody is all glorious and not everybody is all bad. So you can kind of identify with everybody that gets portrayed. I'm curious if there are certain things from your position that you try to add in or you critique or that you think is maybe even doing a good job because of course authors and creators illustrators get inspiration from other things around them and everybody's probably their own toughest critic, but maybe I'm curious if you think there are certain industries or genres that particularly do a good job, and then maybe where I guess you have potentially gotten inspiration from.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And to answer your question, yeah, the reason why so much media is resonating from the East is because it's just good. They've stuck to the principles of good storytelling. And because of that, even if it's from a different country, it's really resonating with folks, even including adults here. Because I have to realize, I think manga, anime, comic books, TV, these are media. They're not genres, right? Horror is a genre, sci-fi is a genre, fantasy is a genre, mystery is a genre. But I think a lot of times people mistake in media. So, for example, like we've had some people on, some, people of Muslim scholars who aren't really into the sort of thing. They don't really know too much, but they're like, yeah, anime seems weird. And I had to have some conversations and be like, well, wait a minute. I get it because when they think anime, they're thinking of like people having like hentai or into hentai tentacle porn type stuff that's weird that might be affecting people youth in the community. And it's like, well, that's one aspect of anime, but hentai is a genre, anime is a medium. And so you could tell different types of stories without any of the tentacle stuff. Um, in anime. So it's a tool and it's how you use it. And so to your question, yeah, I think anime does a really good job of sticking to good storytelling principles, even if they like some of the things that they talk about are really niche. Like there's some manga and some anime that it's just about basketball. Or some of it is just about baseball, you know. But they still do a good job, right? Because they're sticking to the fundamentals of good storytelling. So for me, that's one big inspiration. It's like, no, clearly sequential narrative art, whether you want to call it comic books or manga, there is a desire for it. You can clearly see that because manga sales are going through the roof. It's just you need to it's just how you tell the story is the important th is one of the important things. Um, and so that's I think one thing that I really key off of. Another thing, just like the similar related to that, is just like really being vicious about the quality. To your point about being your toughest critic. So I'll tell you, like I wrote before I brought on my team, and it was just me and the artist. I was the writer, and I wrote like around maybe 10 scripts worth of story, like 10 issues worth of story, or maybe more. But then I brought on like writers like the Sylvir Katic, um, who's a professional screenwriter, and Ezra LC, who's a novelist and also a screenwriter. And as we're looking at this, we had to come to a really hard decision for me. That was like, yeah, we're probably gonna have to do a soft reboot of most of what I wrote and just nuke much of what I wrote. And so we did. So and so yeah, like yeah, so you get the Lesser Evil, and the prose was written by Ezra. The comic book script portion was written by me. Issue number one was written by me, which will come after Lesser Evil. But everything after that is purely those, Sylvia and Ezra, with me just kind of overall directing and staying on top of things and giving my input. And that's the thing. It's like, if you committed to quality, sometimes you have to kill your babies. And I'm like, yeah, and to, because for me, what we're doing here isn't just self-expression, which is art. It's design, which is like uh working with a game designer, Dr. Joe Baxter Webb, and he makes this distinction of like art is like you're creating something as part of your self-expression, and hopefully it gets some sort of emotional reaction from people. Whether it makes money or not doesn't matter. But if you're in the business of design, which includes selling things commercially to people who you're asking to pay money for, then you have to actually think about their experience. It's less about just your self-expression and more about what makes them happy, what makes them entertain. And so because I'm keyed on that, like what makes them entertain, making sure that nothing's boring, nothing's fluff, nothing feels like filler. Like, yeah, I had to nuke most of what I wrote and redo from scratch, and that's fine. I'm cool with that.
Just out of curiosity and sort of to give context, how long did it take you to write those 10 scripts? And then additionally, how much longer did it to take to bring in those people, nuke it, rewrite it, rescript it, and publish it?
So the whole process that you just described, like it's around 2 years, right?
Okay.
So, so yeah, so essentially 1 year was just me like being a lone gun, just me and the artist. And then the second year, I'm like, okay, I need to level up my game because uh, I want to compete with the very best, not just skid by. And so yeah, like it was the second year where it's like, okay, we have to nuke everything or most of the things and kind of almost start from scratch. Yeah.
And what was the day to day like? How much were you working day to day,
Oh man,
time
a lot because
wise?
like there's a day job in tech that I'm doing just to pay the bills, but there's that, and then I have a family, with two kids, and it's like okay, and the time that's left when I just trying to make this happen, and so no, it was a lot, and uh a lot lost a lot of sleep, but when when there's love and there's passion, it moves you through a lot of things, and so I don't regret it.
I'm just letting that soak for a minute. I think that was well stated.
Yeah.
And I hear you. Yes, love and passion will generally continue to drive much of what you do. I think that's the entrepreneurship mindset in
Mhm.
a way of you are going to go to all ends of the earth to pursue your dreams, which I think is awesome. Not everybody has that drive, but I believe everybody should. I wish there was more of a lane that people could take or see the pathway for. And
Yeah,
that's some of what we try to do on this show, like, is present people with that passion where they can they can pursue. So I mean, you're celebrating that.
yeah, and and I also just want to be like give some grace because not everybody has it within themselves to do the entrepreneurial thing because it's as you guys can probably imagine it's there's a lot of failure. There's a lot of like headache and stuff like that, and just a lot of like work with not much payoff, if any. And so, for me, it's just like, certain, I have there, I have people coming in and be like, they're clearly entrepreneurial and they just have that drive and they don't want to be an employee, and that's fine. But I try to tell them the risks, right? That it's not just like I think we have this idea of just like influencers online and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, I made this much money with crypto or etc. And they're just like counting money online. And you have to realize a lot of times these guys are lying. They're like renting the Lambos or they're in front of the mansion that they don't own. A lot of times, no, they are making that money, but it's very temporary. And it's like they're purely at the mercy of their sponsors who could drop them like that. And that's not really, would you consider that a business? I don't know. I don't think I do. Um, so so yeah, if you have the drive, go for it. But if you don't and you just want to make a good living, there's nothing wrong or undignified with doing the corporate thing. It's just like saying, hey, what do I want and am I willing to pay the price? And if the answer is no, then no, that's it's fine, you know.
Was there ever a point in the process of getting to where you are now where you thought, gosh, I don't know if this risk is worth it. I should turn back to corporate.
Uh, I feel like that happens on a recurring basis. I don't think it's just like a time where it just happens once and then you get past it and then that's it. You don't have to think about it again. Because as we do new things and we explore new avenues and like right now we're making a video game, like right, and I'm like, oh, sometimes I'm like, did I make the right decision? Is this really the right time? And I'm like, it makes sense from a strategy perspective and giving people what they want. So why not, right? And obviously, but then it comes to having good business discipline about not having a waste in your processes and you know, not biting off more than you can chew and making sure that everything that you're doing is delivering quality and not junk. Um, so yeah, I think but yeah, so I think th those you can get past those things. You just need to have really keen business sense and have an idea of where the waste is in your process because then stuff could easily balloon up and you can just like blow a lot of money on not much results. And that's when things kind of will get hard. So yeah, I think part of being an entrepreneur is just like also just constantly having to look at trade-offs, being like, okay, if I do this, I'm gonna not have the chance to do this. If I'm okay with it, fine, but how can I do what I want to do without wasting as much time, money, knowledge, etc.
You mentioned a lot about quality, storytelling, success from your perspective and stuff you've put out. How do you measure quality, success? Is it an internal measure? Is there certain metrics? Is there certain sales numbers? Is it the audience? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think there's two things. So there's a craft perspective and there's a business perspective. From a craft perspective, it's like, yeah, it's like, is the premise compelling? Is the beats that come from that premise, do they build up? Do they make sense? Are the characters compelling? So it's like looking at those individual components of storytelling from a craft perspective and saying, hey, bringing it all together, does this work? Does this tell a compelling, complex story with multifaceted characters? And if it does, great. But then there's the business side of it, and for me, the business side of is just like sales. Like that's really what it is, right? I mean, it's just like, yeah, if a lot of the your ideal customers are buying your product, then that's great. But there's also another aspect of it too, which is like how efficient are you? So if you're making a lot of sales, but you're having a lot of waste, are you really successful? Because like remember, like profit equals um, revenue minus overhead. Okay, let's say you're getting a lot of revenue, but your overhead is massive. Your profit isn't going to be as much, right? So I think the overhead thing, people just don't really think about that much. And when I say overhead, I don't just mean in terms of money. I also mean in terms of like time wasted, knowledge lost, rework, too much inventory, stuff like that. That people don't really think about too much. They're just like, oh, they just focus on the sales numbers and the top line revenue and nothing else. And I'm like, that's eh, I think if you're running a small team, you need to be a little bit more disciplined than that.
Maybe diving deeper on that overhead piece that you just brought up,
Yeah,
how do you draw the line on your own tinkering? Going back to the theme of us being our own best critic or own worst critic, I probably should say, I'm sure to an extent you just want to keep reworking and rewriting until you feel it's perfect. The problem
yeah,
is that mountain just keeps getting higher. So
yeah.
how do you draw that line in the sand where you say, no, this is good, it's gotta go?
Okay, so the thing is, it's like this idea of like measuring twice and cutting once. So, when we do anything, just like before doing anything, just diagram it out, write it on paper. Before you write a full, before you write like a full comic book with all the art and etc., um, have the script dialed in. Before you have the script, have an outline, and you know, and that way you could look at the outline and be like, does this make sense? Is this a compelling story? And just from the outline perspective, you could see where the problems are, right? It requires some skill and some craft to figure it out, but a lot of times people just go straight into the writing or into the drawing, which is a problem because writing is expensive, drawing is even more expensive. And so the more you can really dial in on your design thinking, um, and the less you have to worry about rework downstream of that, right? Like in the production process. You don't want to do rework in production. You could do rework in design because doing rework in design is nowhere near as expensive as doing rework in production, like pencils, inks, art, colors, like that. That's when things get expensive. So just that's what I would say. It's just like put front load a lot on your design work, um, and uh, also as much as possible find ways to test things quickly to see where the value is and like invalidate your assumptions. So that's yeah, I would say that like those two things, like front loading on the design uh, piece and rapid testing. And I think if you do well at those, you'll get past that analysis paralysis problem that you're talking about, Adam. You didn't use the term, but I think that's what you're uh, touching on.
Probably yes, when you make it more broad from your specific journey to anybody that is tinkering with a craft.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
You seemed very knowledgeable in storytelling, writing, that skill set, the creativity side of things. And there is that saying out there, you either are creative or you're not. One, do you believe in that? And two, where did you kind of build up this repertoire of like how to actually go about writing a good story, the structure, outlining, planning? How did that all come about for you?
Yeah, I think the first question is like, yeah, they say that you either has it or you don't has it. I I think no. I mean, like, listen, st storytelling, there's a craft to it, and so I think, and if with enough effort and similar to baseball, right? I think anybody, if they're given sufficient training and they practice enough, they can be pretty good at baseball. But at a certain point, once you get to the really elite levels, that's when you know the internal skill uh, how should I put it? That's when it's like, okay, the do you has it or do you not has it might give you an edge. But really, even then, I feel like I wonder how true that is. So no, I think anything that requires you to learn a craft, it's not a magical thing. You just have to learn it and practice it and do it over and over and over and over again until those skills are polished. Um, and so one of the things that helps is like, observing a lot, reading a lot, consuming a lot. When I say consuming isn't a good idea because if you're just constantly binging Netflix, it's not like you're going to be particularly creative. You're just gonna, I mean, you're just gonna maybe be fatter and dumber, maybe just because you're just. But like if you're actively looking at a show and taking notes and saying, hey, here's what works, here's what, and sometimes I do. Like, sometimes like if there's a show that my wife wants to like a comedy movie that my wife wants to watch. I don't really care, but she wants to watch it. I was like, sure. I'll literally take a sheet and just be like, okay, this beat, here's what works, here doesn't work. So I'm actively like thinking about the mechanics of what's happening in front of me. Um, and that helps because you're actively learning, you're actively engaging as opposed to just passively consuming. Um, so I think that being observant and just practicing the craft repeatedly uh, and being curious all the time. It helps. Like I have a creative director, Sylvia. He's always curious about everything. Like I give him a library of books about 15th century history and mysticism and stuff that's relevant to the Brotherhood of the Wolf, and he reads it all. It's like, yeah, and that helps give him like raw material to help plot out these things. And so that's what I would say, just like a lot of curiosity and a lot of practice. Um, yeah,
We live in a world, or our sporting background, where we just constantly heard preparation beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
yeah,
And I feel like to an extent that's kind of what you two were going back and forth on. Like you can work at creativity, you can prepare all you want, but some people do have that kind of upper edge or that little niche skill where they can tell the story, or they have the skill of timing, or this kind of innate feel for proper ethos or how to tie pathos into a story. And yes, you can learn that stuff in school, but I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's from my perspective, some people just have that it factor in a sense.
yeah. I think the it factor probably matters more, and I think every field has an it factor. It might matter more. It might have more weight in athletics because, like, to take a sprinter, right? I mean, you could have the best sprinting coaches, but at a certain point, your fast twitch muscle fibers limit are going to limit you to a certain point. So, I think the more technical the discipline is, the less the factor matters, frankly. So I'm not going to pretend to be a baseball expert, but I would say like the more technical baseball is as a sport, the less the it factor matters. the less technical it is and the more it relies on athletics, just pure athletic ability, then yeah, I think the it factor matters more. But you guys are better judges of how technical baseball is compared to other sports, so I won't go there. But with the creative stuff like writing and stuff like that, like yeah, I think sure there's an it factor, but really it's not as heavy as people think. It's just a lot of time just like writing crappy script after crappy script after crappy script until you can write good scripts. And that just takes time. And that's something that AI can't really help you with, right? Because AI is its values as a research assistant, but it can't help you with that craft. Um, and so I think people who feel like, oh, there's AI, I could just start writing. I was like, well, you're writing, but you're writing stuff that's very vanilla and fly by night stuff that isn't going to be very interesting to anybody. So nothing's going to replace you just learning the craft and doing the work when it comes to this sort of thing.
I actually was gonna go the AI route a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought it up. In your copywriting days, AI obviously wasn't there.
No.
Do you think that affects that job and that world at all?
Yes. Yes, it does. It's if I think because there's a lot of people in the copywriting world, and most of them are just I feel like a lot of them are like from India and Africa, and it's like, why are you guys doing English isn't your first language. Why are you doing copywriting? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, so but put that aside, it's just like yeah, a lot of lower tier copywriters who just uh, aren't paying attention to their craft. I think AI blew them out of the water, honestly. And so I think top line copywriters are still here to stay because they know they've developed the skills inherent in them that they know what good copy is. And so when they do use AI, they're essentially copy chiefing the AI. It's like they're not the AI, they're in control. The AI isn't in control. The AI is just like ideating with them and proofreading and whatever. But they're the ones who are like in the driver's seat. Whereas these lower tier copywriters, it's like the AI knows more than them. So what's the point of what's the point of them being hired? So yeah, I it's true, but not completely. Like it's gotten rid of the lower tier ones, I think, but not the top tier ones. Yeah.
Makes
Banko, do you
sense.
care if I pivot?
No, that was the answer honestly I was expecting, and so I got it. It was gonna be my fun question at the end. So perfect.
But we got there early. So my slight pivot is I think Banko started to allude to this earlier, where we definitely could have gone down that route a little bit more. What is your kind of internal struggle, or how do you gauge what work is valuable to you versus what's valuable to your readership? And how do you play that game in a sense? Like, do you view yourself as a writer that is going to cater to an audience, or are you doing this purely out of your own passion and love for the work that you do?
I'd say like I want to solve the problems I articulated before. Um, and I want to do it in a way that scratches my own itch, but I also need to do it in a way that isn't terribly self-indulgent. That's the thing. It's like balancing like, okay, solve the problems that we're trying to solve, do it in a way that is interesting to me because if I'm not interested in it, I doubt anybody else would be, right? If you're creating stuff that you're not interested in at all, I don't know how you can expect people, strangers to be into it. I think if you do, you're probably a hack by then, is my thing. But anyway, so that's what I would say. It's just like, yeah, no, I have a very clear vision of what the series is, what it's trying to do, the themes that it explores. In terms of like the actual technical execution of the plotting, XYZ, I leave that to uh, my writing team, which knows way more than me. But even then, at every step in the way, like I'm involved in the process to approve or deny or add some notes and modifications, etc. So that way, it's like no, it's a well-structured story. It's a professionally done story, both from a writing perspective and an art perspective. It's still reflective of the things I wanted to explore. and my tastes, but it's done in a way that other people, strangers, would enjoy. And the only question then may be like, hey, I thought XYZ, I thought ABC might be popular with fans, and it's like not so much, but XYZ part of the series they really liked. It's like, oh, okay. Like for example, on The Lesser Evil, um, Nikiforos is the point of view character, but he has his mom, and people who read the book they really liked his mom, which is great because she's a very complex, multifaceted character. But I was somewhat surprised, like, whoa, they're really like uh fans of his mom, and so I'm like, that's great. That's like a happy accident because
Hmm.
it's like you're trying to give each character, you're trying to do right by each character, and so if you do right by each character, yeah, some people are going to be some of those characters are going to be a home run with fans. So it's all good with me.
Has any of the audience feedback, such as that example you just gave, changed the route you were gonna go with the series itself, or are you still mainly staying on the route that you thought the series would go?
I'm staying on the route that I thought the series would go. The only bit of bit of feedback that is helping me is like with the Lesser Evil specifically, we're doing something kind of experimental that we aren't really doing with issue number one, two, three, or anything afterwards. With the Lesser Evil, it's like, okay, let's tell a full story. Half of it is in prose, like text, like you would read in a novel, and that the other half of the story is in grayscale, silent comic book form. So silent, meaning there's no dialogue, it's just the pictures tell the story. And because that way we're flexing our storytelling muscles. One extreme we're using prose, just text. The other extreme we're using visuals, no text. And just that way we're telling a full story using different media and be kind of experimental that way and see how people react to it. And so for a lot of people, they really liked it and they were able to follow everything fine. And they said it really forced them to really pay attention to every detail of the graphic novel portion of it. And it was very enriching for them because the graphic novel is great. The artist is Aurelio Mazzara. He's a professor of the Scuola de Fumetto comic book school in Palermo, Sicily. So he's literally professor of comic books in Italy, and it shows. But other people, they're like, wait a minute, there's no text in the comic book portion. They were more confused as to what was going on. And so the takeaway that I took there is like, okay, if we decide to do anything experimental in the future, just make things super clear that hey, this is what's going on, etc. So as a result, like every time somebody buys the Lesser Evil, I send them a little note saying, hey, this is telling the continuation of a story from prose to graphic novel form, and it's a full story. We're just doing it because some stories need to be read about, some stories need to be witnessed, and just some people might like the experimental nature of that particular book, some people might not. But for me, the takeaway is just like be more crystal clear in communicating, hey, this is what you're getting into. Yeah.
My maybe last kind of fun-ish question here probably has a couple parts to it, and we'll see where it goes. But I would love to get your perfect world picture of what the complete universe looks like of the Tales of Khayr, like what it could turn into, uh, how many books would you want to go, different forms of media, for example, the video game. So if the world is truly your oyster and you have the limitless possibilities, what does the universe look like for you?
Yeah, definitely multimedia for sure, because it's like we have a very eclectic skill set on the team. So like one guy's a screenwriter, the other guy who's also a film director, the other guy is a screenwriter also who's also a novelist. And so but who also worked on video games. So it's just like for us it's like, storytelling is storytelling and we like to explore different media and really do justice by each medium, right? So if we're going to create a video game, we're going to tell a story that can only be told in a video game. If we're going to tell a story in a graphic novel, we're going to tell a story that can only be told in graphic novel. So yeah, for me, it's just like, yeah, a multimedia thing. Like Brotherhood of the Wolf, we've er, uh, Lesser Evil is obviously done. Issue number one, which comes right after that, is done. We're currently doing the art for issue number 2, and we have the story plotted out up until issue number 15. And we know that it'll even go even further, like it easily go into 100 issues or more. Um, but yeah, and if there's a way to make this into an anime, like a Netflix style or a Netflix style like Castlevania type animated series, I'm all down for it, as long as we have the necessary creative control so that people don't turn it into shite. Yeah, that would be my dream.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hmm.
Banko, over to you.
Well, I hope that happens for you. I mean, my fun question actually goes back to you talking about the creative process and actively engaging in the work. You mentioned if it's a movie you don't want to watch with your wife, you take out a notebook and sort of take notes and sort of analyze the movie. How does your wife feel about that when you actually do that process?
She's okay with it. Yeah, and honestly speaking, like, initially like, oh man, I'm not gonna watch this, but then I'm like watching, like, oh, it's surprisingly good. But no, she's fine with it, right? I think as long as I don't fall asleep, which sometimes happens, then it's all good. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it just shows that you're paying attention, right? You're not
Right?
uh,
Active listening.
active listening. It just sometimes I might like you might be too much into the notes, where it's like she might make conversation or whatever, and you're like, huh? Just a second, let me write this down. So, but that's the opposite extreme. But yeah.
Well, before we do let you go, my last question would be, is there anything that we didn't cover today that you think is really important to share in the story of Wes?
No, man, I think our sales page for the Lesser Evil is going to be coming up like hopefully in a week. Um and so until then I would encourage everybody just to go to the website at www.talesofkhayr.com. So that's TALESOFKHAYR.com, where if they go to it, um and if you sign up to my free newsletter, and I don't do spam. I don't send spam. I send just a weekly email, hopefully with entertaining, educational stuff that's interesting. But if you sign up to that, you'll get exclusive access to a free trailer that only people who are subscribed to the email list get. And so, and then once you're on the email list, that's the only people who are able to buy any of our stuff is through the email list. So once you're there, you'll get all the updates on what we got available and when. And our graphic novels, like we only sell them physical, not digital, because I'm in the school of the late great Stan Lee of Marvel Comics, where he said that comic books are like boobs. Sure, it might be nice to look at one on the computer, but it's much better to have one in your hand. And I agree with that. I agree with old Stan, that old lecher. But it's true. So like, when we sell stuff, the Lesser Evil is probably going to be like the appetizer, but everything after that is going to be limited edition. So that's why it behooves people to, if they're interested, to be on the email list, because if they're not interested, at least they could make the decision. But if they're not on the email list, they won't even know that what's available. So that's what I would encourage people to do. And maybe Adam, if you're able to put it in the show notes, that would be much appreciated as well. But uh,
Definitely.
that's that's enough of my demands. That's my prima donna demands. Yeah,
I think we can handle those.
nice.
I don't have anything else. Just thank you, Wes, for coming on, telling your story. Appreciate that. We definitely will include your website in our show notes, and encourage people to visit it and subscribe to the email.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was a blast talking to you guys. You guys are a lot of fun. And yeah, hope to see you guys later.
Appreciate that. Thanks a ton, Wes. And to everyone who tuned in, we greatly appreciate y'all too.
All right, see you.
Hi, everyone. Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.